Thanks for tuning into the Read Platform podcast, sponsored by Ampliance and Klaviyo. And you're listening to myself, James Gurd, and my co-host, couldn't even say that this morning, Paul Rogers. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Well, I'm good. I'm looking forward to this episode because it's an area that's not my core expertise, and I definitely am looking forward to learning more about it. So, firstly, a big welcome to regular listeners for tuning back in. Thank you as always. And if you're a new listener, thanks for giving us a chance. We hope you enjoy the episode. Do subscribe. You'll get episode alerts. We drop a new episode every week, and they're packed full of e-commerce technology, re-platform, and CX advice. Now, our topic today is an important one. It's understanding how Marxent's 3D cloud helps e-commerce retailers with AR and 3D product configuration. So this is an area that I know Paul's worked more closely in this than me, but I've seen a lot of clients increase interest in how they use AR to engage and drive revenue, and how they turn product interest into conversions through smarter product configurators. So really looking forward to learning more on this episode. So what we're going to cover is, what is Marxent's 3D cloud proposition? How much work is it for a retailer to get started with these tools? And how does integration work for some of the e-commerce platforms out there? So let's introduce today's guest. Beck, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen.
So you're founder and CEO at Marxent. So can you give our listeners a flavour? What is Marxent? Where do you sit in the market, and what do you do?
So Marxent is a content management system for 3D products or digital twins of real physical products. We focus today principally in the home vertical. So that would be things like kitchen, bath, decking, furniture, office, closets, and so forth. Our job is to help, whether it's a homeowner or a designer or a pro or a store associate, take a product that's made up of multiple components. People often call them complex product categories. So think things like office chairs or a desk suite in an office or a kitchen. So you have a catalog of disparate products that you need to bring together in one environment so you can purchase them. And what's new and novel about all this is, rather than doing this on like a professional design tool or something that only a designer or a pro could use that they'd have to download on their desktop, we're bringing this all to the browser. So anyone from a homeowner to a pro can do this without any heavy software and can do it from anywhere at any time. And I like to think of us as kind of like the Expedia in a way, in the sense that at one point in time, you had to have a professional, book a ticket for you, and they had a professional set of tools to do that. And then Expedia and all the other travel sites went online, and all of a sudden we could do it ourselves. And so we're doing that same kind of thing for these complex home projects.
That makes sense. So I'll ask the first question. So how did Marxent initially start, and how has the overall kind of proposition or capability changed since then? Was it always kind of enterprise focused, or has that changed over time?
So my brother Barry's our CTO, and we've always been in like B2B SaaS companies. We had a previous company that was a cloud-based platform for marketing that we sold in the mid 2000s. And so we've always kind of been marketing technology, B2B kind of SaaS focused. And the original thesis for the company, so this is early 2011. My background had always kind of been in retail and CRM and customer marketing. And my brother's background is math, computer science. And he came to me and said, I think 3D is going to be a really interesting space, well beyond the home vertical. And I said, well, I know a lot about retail, so let's begin to put together a proposition of how retailers will use 3D to engage consumers. And so our original products were pretty simple. Things like, we wrote the very first augmented reality app for the App Store in November of 2011. So we call ourselves 3D OG. We've been here a while, but the value proposition has continued to mature to a full suite of applications. So augmented reality, product configurators, module configurators, room planners, virtual reality. And so now we have a whole suite of products that sort of circle around the 3D cloud to kind of sort of engage the consumer at multiple points in the journey, from, hey, I'm just thinking about a project, maybe I need a visualizer, to I'm ready to plan and price, I need a full, kitchen planner.
I've got a question. Actually, I've worked with a few premium brands, and I think there seems to be an unfair perception that product configuration is not pretty, right? It's just very functional. That's it. And it doesn't look great. I'd love to hear, like, what do you think drives it from a customer experience point of view? Like, what are the benefits that you see retailers achieving for their customers by putting 3D and AR as part of their strategy?
I think that assumption is actually fair. I mean, historically, these configurator tools to be performant online or a browser, right, had to be pretty simple. You didn't, most, people didn't have like a big, fire-breathing dragon graphics card, that they could use and have these 3D visualization experiences. And so what's really happened is, browsers now support 3D in a pretty meaningful way at pretty high quality. And so I think that the demand to make these configurator tools, sort of look realistic in real time, if I'm building, whether it's an office chair or a tennis shoe or a handbag, if I'm configuring something, I'd sure like it to look, photo real or near photo real as I'm configuring it. I think that demand has always been there. I think the laggard has always been just browser-based platform. You could do this on mobile for quite some time, really the last 8 to 10 years. But browsers are only a couple of years in where, the product looks high quality enough for a brand to really get behind it.
And I guess moving on slightly, so we've had quite a few clients where we've looked at kind of doing the 3D builder piece with AR, and we've done a few projects as well, so via some other third parties. And what I typically found is that projects like this are pushed quite far down the roadmap just because there's a perception that, they're massive projects and, all of the associated aspects of it around kind of building out the renders and everything else. Like, there's a perception that it's a big project. What does the end-to-end project actually look like typically for your customers? Does it need to be a big project, or do you think, I guess if it's 100 products initially, do you think that it could actually be more kind of streamlined for internal teams?
Yeah, our average delivery period is 10 weeks for a new project. So these are not like 3-year-long SAP projects. But I think a lot of that, we've done that somewhat purposefully to try to, we call it the first unit of success, get out quickly, build confidence, and that opens up, further opportunities. So I think there's a combination of things. One, there are this suite of applications from something as simple as like web AR to something like a visualizer to a configurator to a planner to VR. They all have their own sort of dimensions in terms of, okay, how much content do I need to really pull that off? Maybe I only need a couple hundred products that are featured in AR. That might be fine. But in a planning experience, I probably need 3,000 products to create a good consumer experience. And so you sort of look at each of these applications as like, okay, how many products do I need? Okay, there's a cost to that. What's the complexity of the application to set up? How many integrations are there? Or maybe no integrations are necessary. Where something on the further end, like a planner, you might need SSO, and you might need a PIM integration and availability and regionality and pricing and all that. And so we try to help our clients kind of pick the one that they can, sort of digest at the moment and sort of incrementally build. The second part and the sort of less understood known of any of these projects is creating 3D content at a really high quality at scale that's extensible is not an easy thing to do. And so when you behind the scenes, we have a platform called 3D Workflow. So it's what source material do I need? What are the business rules? What kind of assemblies are going to be necessary? What are the mount points between multiple products? What materials are going to be laid on the products? Are there multiple materials per product? Or there, in some cases, we have clients that have variants that run in the billions. If you take, you multiply a geometry times a material times a wood, a wood grain versus a metal and a plastic, the numbers can get very high. And then you go, well, a lot of these products are going to share materials. How do I do this in a data-driven way where it's not all sort of manual, creating sort of monolithic objects? And so the data infrastructure you need to onboard the content, organize the content, reuse assets, QA, publish, and then publishing, you start to think about, well, a web AR product, a 3D model has to be a much smaller asset than something that you could use in like a product configurator. And so now you have all this traffic copying that has to happen of like, okay, which size, what fidelity can go to which application, and you have to make choices in the system. And then you got to tie it all back into analytics and reporting. So our job is, and you've got multiple 3D file formats in there too, as well. So you have to do all these conversions. And so our job is to sort of like just take all that complexity away from the client and say, give us your references, we'll do everything, and then you'll see your application, you can see how it works. And so all that onboarding and organization and orchestration is 98% of the investment we've made in trying to make this easy for clients.
That makes sense. And what is a typical, so let's say it's a builder piece, and as you say, obviously you need to factor in all of the kind of components and stock management and all of that kind of stuff. But what does a typical integration look like? Do you have kind of pre-built connectors to any platforms, or is it a case of actually, most implementations are bespoke API implemented?
Yeah. So our philosophy is everything we do in our platform is modular. So if you have a lot of configuration choices that you can make, and we try to keep it sort of loosely coupled. So we can weave our modules in between kind of, if they have a customer journey already built out and they want one component here and one component here, we're able to fit in and sort of like a, like a subdomain that we can get into the middle of their journey where we're not trying to take over their whole journey. That's one. And then around integrations, it's typically CRM, SSO, PIM, cart, in-store checkout. Those are the typical integrations. And we've got a standard framework for each of those and an API, but most of the time we work around our clients' open API. Whatever they have available, we'll work our system around it to take advantage of that. Asking a big client to sort of rewrite APIs is usually a recipe for disaster.
And would you usually do that work yourself, or would
we do?
Okay.
We do. We're kind of, the company today, we're about 130 people. We're kind of past that. We're in the, growth phase, and we've sort of held on to direct client relationships up till this point because, when you add, we do get, we have done some work for with Accenture and Bain and others, but more as like advisory with, but not typically like a integrations partner. Although we're getting to the point where that'll be possible, and so we'll start doing that.
Well, I just wanted to come back. You talked about your onboarding workflow and setting up automations to limit the complexity for clients, which makes perfect sense. I just wanted to put it into a bit more layman's terms for an e-commerce team that's never gone through this process before and is a bit nervous about maybe doing like a 3D product configurator or an AR. I know I'm working with a luxury brand at the moment. They're nervous about putting products into AR. What do they need to do anything to their source imagery if it's in really good high quality format? They've got all of the different angle shots. Do they need to do anything at all to make those images AR model ready? Or are you saying literally you just suck up that those assets and then you create the renders yourself?
Yeah, the only exception to that. So most of the time we're using a product imagery on a URL to create the assets. And part of what you learn is that the more you do, the better you get, and you can start to sort of anticipate. We have a massive library of materials now. So every brown leather and, stainless steel and nickel finish you could possibly, we have all of that. And that's where really the art is and a lot of the quality and the visuals. And so if we get a new client that has a nickel finish, we don't build a new nickel finish. We just, take a nickel finish that we have and repurpose it. And so that's where a lot of the quality. So we've really sort of created a premium library there. There are some instances like, let's say you have like a cross weave fabric on an upholstered item that's completely a custom fabric. There's no way we'd have that in the library. In some cases, we do ask our clients to send us like high res photography, large enough that we can tile the material and lay over the product. But that's not typically the case. Typically, we can work right off the product page.
Okay, go on. You talked about trying to obviously keep this simple for people and not having to do loads of complex API work. Do you have, or are you planning to build out any one-click install apps for platforms like Shopify, BigCommerce, where people can just almost take a vanilla version that will do 80% of the stuff out of the box, or is it just not feasible to do that because of the complexity of the modeling?
I don't think it's feasible. If it were something as simple as like color variance, like you had an object that was like a fixed monolithic object that just changed from red to blue to green, I think that's entire. I'm sure stuff out there exists today. We like to play in data. It's a much more sort of defensible position. That the business rules are actually the thing that I'll give you a funny example. Like if you go into a typical DIY and you're going to buy a kitchen, that they have got a catalog that's 2.5 inches thick of every product that you can buy, and then you have a designer sitting next to you, and all of the business rules are in the head of that designer. That the only place what can go together and how far the hob needs to be above the stove all sits in that person's head. And so what we do is when we onboard the 3D models, we imbue them with behavioral data so they know how to interact with one another. Like, oh, I can connect to you, or, oh, here's a conflict, or, oh, I need to be so far away from you, oh, or I can't be. And so that's the stuff that this kind of one-click setup would be hard to do, where you have business rules and relationships that have to be sort of added. And right now there's no automated way to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially I can imagine kitchen configuration and implications of picking one item and the impact on the size of the others. How about, so say if you take the AR, say a client of mine in the like home furnishing space really wants to do AR so that people, so it's for their small business professionals like designers, but also for their home audience. So they could be on their phone and be looking at one of their stalls and seeing what it looks like in their lounge. Is there, that's a simpler, obviously, play because there's not loads of configuration. It's just taking the core product image and putting it into general. Is that feasible in the future? Do you think to have apps for that, or again, is there still a data challenge?
I think for sure. So web AR is really the simplest thing you can do today, but there are some limitations. And so web AR is Apple and Google control those file formats. That's a USDZ and a GLTF, they call them. Think of them as like a PDF. Like once you finish typing in a PDF and you save it, right? It's everybody can open and read a PDF, but it's a compiled file format where you can't do anything with it once it's in your scene or when you're looking at an AR. And so, if you've got a pretty simple product category with not a lot of permutations, web AR is a really good solution. But if you have a long tail of permutations, then you really need a product configurator that then once you finish the configuration, you can publish an AR file. And so you're starting to see these sort of connectivity points between, oh, I've got a product configurator that outputs an AR asset when I'm done configuring. So things like that are so simple at web AR for sure. Highly configurable web AR is still require quite a bit of. There's no shortcut to that.
What is Ampliance? In a word, it's freedom. The freedom to build a digital experience as limitless as your vision. Create, preview, schedule, and manage all your content in one easy place. Find out more at ampliance.com. Ampliance. Experience freedom.
Right, and then I guess so. I was having a look around your website over the weekend, and you reference your kind of bundles proposition, which appears to be kind of a series of like accelerators, I guess, for different types of retailers and some of the products you offer. Can you just talk us through how these work and how they differ from kind of an end-to-end custom implementation?
I think, I talked a little bit before about this continuum of sort of simple 3D to, more complex, more integrated, more 3D model 3D, right? So what we've done is try to, what we've sort of found is that each of these applications have a different purpose and a different outcome. And so think of it like a customer journey where it's like, okay, I need, at the very simple end, a customer could look at some how-to stuff and submit a lead to to like a virtual design team, right? That is probably going to be, that would take you 5 minutes and people could do it quickly, but the lead value is not going to be very high, right? Because it's so easy for somebody to do the investment is so low. Then you might go to something like a estimator, right? Where you put in some information about your project. It may take you 15 minutes. And so it's a bit more of an investment. The leads might be lower, but the lead quality is going to go higher. Then you go, okay, well, now I want to visualize where somebody can start picking styles and that sort of thing. Well, that might be a 30-minute investment. Leads are lower, but lead quality is higher. And so what we've done is, and then you go all the way to like a planner where somebody might spend hours and hours and the lead volume may be lower, but the lead quality is going to be the highest you can get, right? They're way down the funnel. And so what the bundles are really about are trying to create that sort of, here's where you would start, like higher lead volume, lower lead quality, but good engagement, and sort of work your way into higher and higher lead quality across all of these tools. And so it's more of a solution selling kind of framework to give people okay, here's your entry level, here's your more complex, and again, sort of starting them with the lowest investment possible.
And how does it work from a maintenance point of view? So if somebody's building a configurator and they've sort of the data model in the platform, is adding new products from the ranges, is it just an automated process if the data model doesn't change? So new variants, new collections, or is there a manual process each time they have to upload and update catalogs?
No, it's all automated. And you hit on a key point, which is, let's say you're a manufacturer of, office furniture and you have a new material that can go on the back of a chair, right? The last thing you want to do is go through and touch every single chair, right? So in our infrastructure, you load up that material one time, you say who's it applied to, and it's all automated and everything gets applied in real time. And so you hit the nail on the head. It's like once you build, like a Macy's has like 15,000 3D products in our catalog that we built over the last 3 years. Like, which stores these go to, which applications they go to, what new products are coming online, which ones are getting discontinued, which ones are getting featured, how you merchandise the app. Like, that's the workload that you want to make sure you've got a great data model, or you could end up doing a lot of bespoke work.
And so, say for example, if I'm a furniture retailer and I've got all of my sofas in, I've got all the materials and all the configuration options, and all I do is add 5 new sofas. So there's no new materials, no new configuration, just 5 new products. Is that automatically in the data feed? So they would just appear within the configurator. It would. So that's all part of the workflow. Cool.
Yeah. I mean, you can have like a staging area where you do QA, and then you can publish. And then we have like a CDN environment where it's separate from the development and production. So the production environment's not touching the testing environment. And so you can do all this sort of testing and QA and validation and integration and publish to the CDN.
So one of the biggest, or like one of the best builders we've talked about on the podcast, and my personal favorite is Tilco, which has been like market leading for years. What are some of the what are some of the best builders that have been built via Marxent, or some of the best ones that you've seen or worked on?
Kingfisher's been a client of ours for quite some time. B&Q, we do their kitchen and bath and storage planner. And it's been interesting. What they were trying to do, which was ambitious, is they went through sort of rationalization of their range to say, okay, we've got too many ranges, let's simplify and make sure they're interoperable and scale easy, right? And I think they took quite a bit of that in-house as well. Then what they said secondarily is, I want to be able to work with I want my designers and my pros and my consumers all to be using the same tool set. So I have all this collaboration and sharing across. So one of the very cool things that I can do in like one of our tools is, if let's say you've come to me, or let's say I've gone online and I've found the tool and I build 5 kitchens, right? And then I reach a point where like, okay, this is a several $1,000 purchase, I would like to have some advice and counsel before I make my decision. I can then contact you and give you access to and share my projects. And then you could pick up on my projects and start sort of optimizing them based on your design experience. And when you're done, you can share them back, almost like a Slack chat, like this asynchronous sort of coordination. So we don't have to be on a Zoom call together. We can share the project back and forth and edit and comment. And so that, I think that the real advancements in this space are not necessarily about kind of how complex the configurator is, or can it, lock these. It's more that it's opening it up to more of a collaborative environment. I'll tell you, one of the little tricks in this space is you want consumers to touch these tools. And the reason is if they get engaged, the likelihood that they're going to purchase goes way up, because it creates this sense of ownership. And so if you start on a configuration for me, send it to me, say, what do you think? Maybe you want to pick out a wall or a floor color. And maybe I do something simple, like just book a wall and a floor color. Although it's not a big complex design, I'm now part of the project. And so that sort of like letting multiple people engage and touch is super valuable. Plus, we had one lady spend 50 hours building 10 different projects in our tool. Clearly, she's not ready to buy yet, but all this data and all this information, and she was able to engage, with a brand without having to consume the time of, the store associates, which has really never been done before. It was like there was no tool to use. Previously, she would have been, working in PowerPoint and, Photoshop and ripping things out of magazines and MacGyvering together some sort of vision. Now she can do it all on her own.
That makes sense. And would you say your typical implementation is more complex? Would you say that's kind of a differentiator of Marxent, rather than, because there's obviously a lot of like smaller companies now doing some of this stuff that's maybe a little bit more templated and more kind of front end orientated? Yeah,
we're definitely, our niche is when you're going to put your whole catalog online, like when you've committed to most of it's funny, it used to be when people called, 2 years ago or earlier, would be, hey, I'm thinking about a XYZ 3D app. That's not how they buy today, especially the big enterprise guys. Now they call and they say, I need a 3D content management system because I plan to launch, a series of applications across brands, channels, and so forth. It's not actually too different than like a CRM implementation. It's like you wouldn't buy 9 different CRM apps, right? You'd buy one and then sort of, distribute it out across, customers and divisions. And so it's a very similar kind of, some of our very best clients are new opportunities, or where they've done something bespoke internally or with a partner. And then they said, okay, now let's scale. Right. And that's where we can really help.
That makes sense. And I guess when we first started talking about you coming on the podcast, one of the suggested topics was around kind of Web3 and the metaverse. So I guess I wanted to ask a question, which is basically, obviously 3D models are a big part of this world, but how does Marxent work with Web3, and like where do you kind of add value on that side of things?
So it's interesting. So the it's the metaverse is such a sort of broad thing to try to understand. I have a view on what it really is, or what it real will be. I think the metaverse as like calling a place where like a retailer and brand has a virtual mall, right, or a virtual car lot, where I go online and I experience that brand in a much more immersive way, and maybe I buy something. Like, to me, that's not the metaverse. That's just kind of a branding. It's sort of a 3D website, right, in terms of experience. I think what's going to be really interesting is, I've been calling them portals. It's like, I think the real metaverse, in order to have really interesting, sort of compelling content, It's going to be made up. There'll be tools that allow individual contributors, kind of like yourselves and what you guys do with your podcast, is you'll be able to create sort of interesting content, and there'll be a lot of them. And then the real metaverse will be the piping between those, sort of almost like a hyperlink between these worlds. And that's what will happen is you'll have all these individual contributors, and they'll start to kind of come together in common interest areas and then link. So in 3D or in my headset, I can navigate between these multiple experiences. And so I think that that's what, when we talk about the metaverse years from now, I think that's what it'll end up being, is more of this sort of how to navigate between sort of bespoke experiences. I think today, if I was a retailer and I'm thinking about the metaverse, it's probably pretty practical applications. Like if you could call AR and planning tools, kind of metaverse experiences, especially if there's some sort of like collaboration and sharing involved. But I was there when before augmented reality was called augmented reality, we called it holograms. And I was there when I think I bought the very first Oculus headset in 2012 or whatever it was. So that was 7 years between when the CES hype of Oculus, and to where it was a practical sort of, commercializable application. And I lived through that whole sort of hype cycle. I think metaverse, we got a good 5 to 7 years before I think we see real practical, scalable applications. I wish that weren't the case, but that tends to be kind of the pattern.
Yeah, I'm hoping they found a better name for it in 7 years' time.
Yeah.
And it's not so directly linked to Mark Zuckerberg's company.
Now, what's so funny too is that, when you're early to market, you think, AR and VR, right? It's like early and it's hypey and people are excited. And you're sort of like trying, no, it's practical. It can work. And, that's part of my job, is getting them into like, hey, this is here now and you can get real value out of it. And so we just smoothed our way into that spot coming out of COVID, where all of a sudden everything we were doing virtually like made a ton of sense. Like people were like, yes, I have to have a self-service virtual tool. And so we just got into like, okay, it's here and now. And then the metaverse came out and sort of moved it back into the hype. I was like, geez,
yes,
we'll live through it.
And we've touched on it during this podcast about you were saying that one of the big changes has been the browser capabilities to support this sort of technology. It's not just required, it's not just mobile apps, etc. I'd love to know, what's your perspective on where the browsers are currently at, and any major browser changes that are really helping you drive this forward, or that are coming down the line that are going to make this even better for retailers.
That was a huge inflection point in our business like 2.5 years ago. So, Unity and Unreal didn't really they were really built, came out of gaming, right? And so I'll give you just a really simple example. So if I were in a rendering engine in like Unity, and I was playing a game and I was a character that ran across a screen, like you would want to re-render, every moment of that experience, so the shadows and the lighting would all look real, right? But that's a tremendous amount of overhead in a browser. Like on a dedicated device or a gaming machine, that's fine. And you want that kind of experience. But in a living room planner, if I move a couch from one side of the room to the other, do I really need to like recalculate the lighting? Can I just turn that off and turn it back on when it reaches its destination? And from a user perspective, you don't like, that's perfectly fine. And so the overhead in these gaming engines was way too high to create a really good browser experience. It was sort of high quality and performant. And so Babylon, which is an open source rendering engine that came out of some employees from Microsoft, really was a game changer, because now all of a sudden we could run one of these experiences with my laptop, buzzing and catching on fire because I'm trying to, render too much. And so we still have to do a lot around, the size of each individual asset, how many assets you can have in a scene, giving users the ability to sort of adjust quality levels, performance and quality. So there's still a lot of that optimization happening, but the fact that you can create a WebGL asset in a browser that's a live runtime 3D model and you can't tell that it's not a photo or close, like 90%, you can't tell that it's, it looks like a photo. Like, that's amazing. And so in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll have a real WebGL asset that you won't be able to distinguish from a photograph on a browser, which means there's no reason to ever have a photograph on a product page again. Like shampoo bottles, shoes, every product category will turn into a 3D model on a product page that you can fully, articulate. And the reason is, once you have a live 3D model on a product page, you can do a lot more with it, right? Somebody can take it, I can create assets out of it, I can share it, I can view it in AR. And so that's what's really going to happen over the next 5 years, is that we'll just all get used. I mean, we'll be shocked if we click on a product page and it's a photo and I can't do anything with it. Like, I can't turn it around or look at it. You'll be irritated, right? It'll be like dial-up internet if I can't manipulate the asset.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that's it's an interesting. I think a lot of people probably would have expected that to at least be a bit further along by now. But yeah, interesting.
Well, not every product category makes sense, right? I mean, there's furniture was kind of a layup, right? That was like the most obvious use case, and it's a proxy for measuring when you put up like an AR product in a room. Oh, why do you need to see a shampoo bottle in 3D? Right? Probably not. But if you can increase engagement, you can get a little bit of lift across a lot of sessions. And so shoes, kind of, handbags makes more sense, but it's like each category is sort of moving its way slowly into, okay, this is worth the investment.
I think like some of the more mainstream technologies, enabling it would probably make quite a big difference as well. Like at one point, Shopify stores started rolling out 3D modeling and AR just because Shopify had started allowing for it. But yeah, I think that's the big one that's going to drive.
Well, when people start scanning their own assets and it all becomes, community driven. Yeah, I mean, that definitely will make a big difference.
I think whatever can basically reduce the entry cost for doing 360-degree imagery will have a big impact on a lot of categories, not just on the obvious ones where people want to really look and feel the product. So even in consumer packaged goods, one of the big issues is being able to, you can't pick up the product and look at the nutrition label, and most of us are lazy and don't read down. So loads of online grocers or brands wanting to work with online grocers looked at what it costed, and actually the cost of doing all of different photographs to then turn it into a 360-degree model.
And then you can then you can open it up, and if somebody creates their own metaverse, experience, they can take your assets, make them part of the experience, and you've got, product placements, and there's absolutely.
Great. And then last question for me. So what else do you have on the roadmap beyond kind of improvements to the core kind of products and offering?
So one of our core missions has always been to bridge the gap between when you were inspired to buy something to go where you have to design and configure it and then ultimately purchase. And like if you've gone into design a kitchen and you got, let's say you built your floor plan and you're like, okay, I'm ready to design, and you click on the catalog and it's like, okay, I need a 36 by 24 cabinet. Oh wait, here's a 30 by 24. Like the process of picking and choosing and sort of Legoing together a kitchen is like that's a lot of work, and you've got to have a great imagination and if you've never done it before, it's too much work to ever see this really get to consumers. And so what we've been working on is we take inspirational photos that we build out of the platform. And rather than going into the catalog, you can drag and drop the product pieces out of the inspirational photo into the 3D scene. So it's like if you can't draw, you can trace. And so that's been a big improvement in helping people self-serve. And then you can go right to checkout. The next evolution of that is what we call magic rooms, which you've just released this, which is now that I have your floor plan and I have the inspirational photo you want, I can click on that floor plan and auto-generate the room in the scene. So in seconds, I can build the whole kitchen based on a set of rules and design parameters and, where the windows and doors are and the heating and cooling. Then once I build the room automatic, but it takes the the design intent from the photo and keeps it, but just makes it fit your room. And then I can start clicking through every possible permutation that can go in that room. So it's like, it's a terrible analog, but I've been using Tinder for room design. I can just start swiping and just rebuilding the kitchen and rebuilding it and rebuilding it and rebuilding it and rebuilding it. You know, I want it laid out here. I want it laid out here. If I want to change it, and it just keeps swiping through. It's like 3D photo swiping. And so that's a pretty big unlock for the space, and it'll go to all the other categories. So all of a sudden, you know, where we're headed is you take your phone, you scan your room. I have a floor plan. I pick a picture. I tap the picture and I get a room built. And then I just keep tapping through pictures until I find the one that I like that fits my space. So that's where we're headed, is this sort of fully automated, inspirational design experience.
So, and when you say that's where we're headed, what's the time? Is that the vision this year, or is it going to be a phased approach? Because that sounds like quite a meaty evolution.
We've got 5+ years invested in this. You know, probably X amount of $1 million. So we just launched our beta version. So we're in testing now, and we'll start in kitchens, and then we'll move to the other categories as well. So yeah, kitchens is probably like the the most difficult one for an average homeowner to do. And so if we can make it work there, we can make it work in the other spaces. Yeah. So by this time next year, we hope to have this rolled out to most of our clients and in multiple categories.
Thanks. I look forward to hearing about when the first one's live, so we can have a good look around. Yep. That's all the key question to ask. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you. I learned some new stuff, which is always really useful. I guess a last question would be, if anyone listening is interested in learning more, or if they've got a question where they think, well, that didn't quite make sense, I want some more information, how do they reach out, and who do they reach out to?
Sure, they can reach out to me. It's just Beck, Beck, at Marxent, marxent.com. And we're more than that. We do a lot of free, solution consulting, helping people, try to find the right solution and really understand the space. We also do some 3D 101 kind of courses for people who are new to the space as well. So quite a few resources where we can hopefully be of service.
Okay. Excellent. And thanks to everyone who listened in as always. Do keep an ear open for your next episode. They land every Tuesday. And let us know if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover. If you haven't subscribed, we'd love you to, and you get alerts for every episode that comes out. So thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, James.
For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.